What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to CLEO's Network for another episode of QCC, the series in which I answer your questions, review your comments, and consider your concerns. In the last episode, I asked for everybody to leave comments, questions, and concerns in the YouTube comments regarding Evolving Skies. Anything about the next Pokemon TCG set that you wanted to talk about in the comments. And a lot of you commented. I was so happy to see that and read all of the comments. I do want to note, if your comment, question, or concern is not featured today, do not let that discourage you from continuing to comment down below, because I will try to get to as many comments as I can, and also ones that fit the topic of the videos that I'm trying to make. As always, this channel is sponsored by PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get ptcgo codes, and also PokemonCard.io. Please check out those links in the description down below, and also consider subscribing to this channel for daily Pokemon TCG content if you enjoy this video. Continuing with the topic from episode 1, which was Evolving Skies, I actually only have one comment selected for today because I thought we could make an entire video out of it and give this topic the attention it deserves. Today's question comes from Les Jeux Video C'est Palpitant. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of those pronunciations. They said, question for the next episode. Strangely, I saw 0 deck lists with Glaceon VMAX, like if people forgot him. He's weak to metal, but he has an item to lose that weakness. And also, most of the decks are now VMAX, so he can be immune to almost anything except Zacian and Zamazenta V. So my question is, will Glaceon VMAX be good? First, I want to thank you for commenting this because it sent me down a rabbit hole of sifting through Japanese deck lists for Glaceon VMAX decks, and I do think this is an interesting card, and I'm happy to focus today's episode all around Glaceon VMAX. So let's take a look at Glaceon VMAX first. Glaceon VMAX originally came out in EV Heroes over in Japan, but outside of Japan will be coming out in the Evolving Skies set. Glaceon VMAX is a Water-type VMAX Pokemon with 310 HP. Of course, it evolves from Glaceon V, which I'll put up on the screen here. It does have a pretty neat attack. Glaceon VMAX has the ability Crystal Veil, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon VMAXs, excluding other Glaceon VMAXs. So this Crystal Veil ability is quite good, considering everybody expects that we are going into a VMAX heavy standard format in post-rotation. In the Sword and Shield Evolving Skies format, GXs are all gone. There are some strong V Pokemon, but most of the decks being hyped up and built and tested and prepared for focus around VMAX Pokemon. Now you have this Pokemon here, Glaceon VMAX, that says it cannot be damaged by Pokemon VMAX. That is a very good walling ability. So this ability, Crystal Veil, is going to be the main factor of why you would build a deck focused around Glaceon VMAX, or why you would fit a thin Glaceon VMAX line into another deck. Of course, Glaceon VMAX would be nothing without an attack to actually do some damage. It does have Max Icicle for Water Colorless that does 150 and 30 to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon, which is a fine attack. It does almost enough to two-shot most VMAXs, so a little bit of extra damage from like an Inteleon from Chilling Rain's quick shooting ability will get you there to two-shot other VMAXs. Now, as today's comment notes, Glaceon VMAX is weak to metal, which is a pretty bad weakness to have if you want to wall out VMAXs but get hit by V Pokemon, because some of the strongest V Pokemon, Zacian V and Zamazenta V, are metal. Luckily for Glaceon VMAX, it has the Frozen Leaf Badge Pokemon tool card that reads if the Pokemon this card is attached to has Leafeon V or Glaceon V in its name, it has no weakness and no retreat cost. So this is a great tool because it removes weakness, which is something other Pokemon cannot just do at their whim in post-rotation standard, and it gives Glaceon VMAX free retreat, which is even better than Air Balloon. So with that in mind, I don't think you can accurately evaluate Glaceon VMAX without taking into consideration that it also has this Snow Leaf Badge tool that you'll almost always be playing alongside Glaceon VMAX, at least in decks focused around Glaceon VMAX. So to shortly answer the end of the question before we get a little bit more into it, yes, I do think Glaceon VMAX is a good card, especially when you are mindful of the Snowleaf Badge card that it has at its disposal. I think a card that walls off the strongest mechanic in the game while also doing a considerable amount of damage and being able to remove its weakness and its retreat cost and not being one-shot by pretty much anything because it doesn't have weakness with that tool card, it sounds like a good card to me. Now, as our commenter said today, they haven't seen any deck lists for Glaceon VMAX. I personally haven't seen a lot of people sharing deck lists or talking about the card, but as someone who frequently peruses hohonews.com, I have seen my fair share of Glaceon VMAX, so before recording this video, I went back and recollected on some of my favorites that I've seen and picked those out to feature in today's video. Now, a few things to discuss before we get into looking at some of these sample Glaceon VMAX deck lists. They are being played in Japan, and they are being played in a format which we will barely get to touch outside of Japan, since it is roughly team up through Evolving Skies, and that format will only exist for us for a couple of weeks before rotation happens just 2 weeks after Evolving Skies comes out. So there are some notable cards that will be in these decks that we will not be able to play with in post-rotation standard format, namely Chaotic Swell to keep Path to the Peak out of play, because Path to the Peak is definitely a nuisance to Glaceon VMAX, and also Mallow and Lana, which may sound like a peculiar card for me to pick out as something that Glaceon VMAX is specifically losing. But when you think about it, Glaceon VMAX is not going to be getting hit by other VMAX Pokemon that do a lot of damage. Of course, unless they have something to go through effects or they can turn your ability off. But outside of that, a lot of opponents are probably going to have to use less than optimal attacks and less than optimal attackers to damage Glaceon VMAX, which means they'll probably do less damage than is typical in the current standard format, and Mallow and Lana would be able to heal a lot of that damage. So losing Mallow Lana does seem like it would hurt Glaceon VMAX decks, and some of the decks we see today are including Mallow and Lana in them. So keep it in mind, this will be a different format than we will be building Glaceon VMAX in, but there will be a short 2 weeks or so where Evolving Skies will be on ptcgo, and you can play in the current standard format that we have at the time of recording this video, plus Evolving Skies, and there will probably be a handful of online tournaments to play in over at play.limitlesstcg.com in that team up through Evolving Skies format, if you are interested in playing these exact lists that we look at today. The first list we'll look at here for Glaceon VMAX is probably my favorite of the four that we're going to review today. Now, it could possibly be played in post-rotation. It does lose a lot of cards, but you can still build it in the same vein of playing a Glaceon VMAX-centric deck with no other attackers and no other Pokemon that you're leaving in the active in the mid to late game in optimal situations. So this deck plays a 3-3 line of Glaceon VMAX with the Snorlax from Vivid Voltage to help you draw cards, and then also the Dusknoir from Vivid Voltage to shut off special energies to hurt your opponent even more. So they can't swing into Glaceon with VMAXs, Dusknoir is turning off their special energies, and all the while you're healing with Mallow and Lana multiple times a game. So I do think this deck looks like fun, and I think it's a deck that I would enjoy. But let's talk about some of the things here we could change for post-rotation, or more so the things that we're forced to change for post-rotation. Now, that Duskull that helps you evolve a little faster is going to rotate, so you would have to play just a regular Duskull and probably end up playing rare candies instead of the Dusclops. Chaotic Swell, of course, is rotating, so we'll need some other stadiums to play to bump Path to the Peak, but notably Chaotic Swell would stop Path to the Peak from entering in the first place, so that's going to be an issue that we're losing Chaotic Swell. And then the entire tag call engine is gone as well, so the tag calls, Mallow and Lana's, Cynthia and Caitlin's, and Guz Mahala's are all going to be gone. So this deck could possibly be built. I think it would probably lose the Snorlaxes and lose the Dusclops and play an Inteleon line and then some rare candies to get out the Dusknors and just skip the Dusclops altogether and replace the tag call engine with a more traditional supporter lineup of more Melanies, Research, Marnie, etc. Now, having looked at a deck that can focus around Glaceon VMAX and can roughly be adapted to play a similar play style in post-rotation standard format, let's look at a deck that is quite different, can't really tell what it's focusing on here, and cannot be salvaged for the post-rotation standard format, and is a great reason why maybe we're not seeing a lot of people share these Glaceon VMAX decks, because they need to be changed drastically, or at least some of them do, to be played in the post-rotation standard format. So this one is Glaceon VMAX thrown into a Mewtwo and Mew tag team Welder box. Mewtwo and Mew Welder has been a combination ever since the two cards were together in standard format, and Mewtwo just kept on gaining new partners along with Aurora Energy to have other attackers in the deck as well. Glaceon VMAX does synergize with Welder since it costs water colorless to attack, so Aurora Energy plus a Welder to Fire Energy means you can start using your attacks. So this is quite an interesting deck, and I've seen this pop up several times, both on Twitter from Japanese events and players, and also over on hohonews.com. So I do think this is an idea that many people over in Japan have had, but we won't necessarily get to enjoy in the post-rotation standard format that is happening in September. Next, showing off how versatile Glaceon VMAX just might end up being, we have another deck that's completely different from the first two, featuring a 2-2 line of Glaceon VMAX with an Inteleon lineup of the Shady Dealings Drizzle with 1 Shady Dealings Inteleon and 2 Chilling Rain Inteleon with Quick Shooting, as well as 3 Suicune V, which is a really good attacker coming out in Evolving Skies, and it also has an ability that lets you draw a card. So this is more of a water-themed Glaceon VMAX deck, playing 3 Melanie, Capacious Bucket, and also another water backup attacker, not focusing on many versatile options like the Mewtwo deck had, and also not focusing on just having a Glaceon VMAX the whole game that you heal and help it tank, like the first list we looked at. So I do think Glaceon VMAX shows itself here as being able to be put into a lot of different decks, or being able to build decks around Glaceon in many different ways. Do keep in mind that it might not seem like that immediately after rotation, because naturally a rotation will leave us with less sets in the card pool immediately after it happens, but as more sets are released, we'll have more options and we'll be able to build more and more different kinds of decks and have decks vary from one another more so than you might see directly after the rotation happens. I believe I've saved the best for last, with Glaceon VMAX, Moltres V, and Cinccino being the final deck list we'll look at today for Glaceon VMAX. I think this one can work really well in post-rotation because you're not losing a lot of cards from this list. Replace the Pokecoms with more Evo Incenses, replace the Viridian Forest with Training Court, replace the Cynthia, Caitlyn, Malolana, and Reset stamps with maybe another Melanie and some Marnies, and you're good to go. The Viridian Forest being in this deck actually is a good sign, I think, because it means we won't miss that Chaotic Swell too much, possibly. Like I said, Chaotic Swell keeps Path to the Peak from ever coming into play, while other stadiums just bump it. But also keep in mind, Path to the Peak is not just going to be in every VMAX deck you come up against as a potential counter against Glaceon VMAX. So you might even play a little bit differently in the matchups where you expect that the deck your opponent's playing probably has some Path to the Peaks in it. So I think this is the perfect starting spot if you want to build Glaceon VMAX for the post-rotation standard format. And having Galarian Moltres in there allows you to accelerate energy to Galarian Moltres, energy switch it off to Glaceon, and attack with Glaceon a little bit easier. It's also a great dark type attacker for when you're playing against dark weak Pokemon like Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, which is a very strong card. So I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of QCC. And although today we only featured one person's comment, it's not always going to be like that. And please continue leaving comments in either this video or the first episode regarding the topic of Evolving Skies. I plan to still use comments from the last video for at least the next episode, possibly 2 or 3 more episodes. So if you didn't see your comment here, don't worry. You still have a shot for it to be featured in an upcoming video. And feel free to leave more comments with your comments, questions, and concerns for future episodes of this series. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider subscribing to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content, and check out PotownStore.com for ptcgo codes and PokemonCard.io for all of my standard format deck lists. Any links you might need are in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.